How can you change your life? In Atomic Habits, James Clear argues that the key lies in your habits, the automatic behaviors that make up more than half of what you do every day. Clear contends that implementing the right habits will drastically improve your life. But to do so, you must understand how habits work and how to change yours. In this guide, you'll discover why habits matter and the 3 mindsets you can use to create them. You'll then learn how habits form and the 4 keys to changing yours. Finally, you'll learn how to continue improving habits you've implemented. Along the way, we'll examine how other psychologists and experts approach habit formation, and we'll explore how Clear's theories either align with or differ from theirs. New section: Small adjustments lead to massive transformations. Clear explains that implementing atomic habits, or small improvements in behavior, changes your life because behaviors compound. That is, they build on each other to create more and more changes. Performing one good behavior leads to another, then another, and soon you've transformed your life. Short form note: Clear focuses on how continuing the same behavior compounds. Saying one nice thing to your spouse won't massively impact your relationship, but doing so every day will. In The Power of Habit, productivity expert Charles Duhigg adds that different habits can likewise compound upon each other. Changing one core habit can trigger a chain reaction that encourages you to change other habits. Clear identifies 3 levels of habits: goal-driven, system-driven, and identity-driven habits. Goal-driven habits. Clear explains that a goal-driven habit is a behavior you do in order to achieve a specific goal. This is the most common way people try to change their behavior. For example, you might choose to study 2 extra hours each day in order to ace a specific test. Short form note: What kinds of goals should you shoot for? In Principles, Life and Work, billionaire Ray Dalio recommends that you be audacious. If you know with certainty you can achieve a goal, then you're not aiming high enough. System-driven habits. Clear contends that system-driven habits are those that focus on the systems or processes that will get you to your goal, instead of focusing on the goal itself. For example, developing a study routine is a system-driven habit because it focuses on the process of studying rather than the goal of acing a specific test or course. Short form note: Like Clear, indistractable author Nir Eyal suggests that some people fail to develop habits because they fail to focus on the processes. Eyal adds to the idea by arguing that you can only form a mindless habit by repeating processes that require effort, but that some people don't put in this effort because they mistakenly think habits should be easy from the beginning. Identity-driven habits. Clear explains that identity-driven habits are behaviors we perform because they match our beliefs about who we are. In other words, our identity. For example, if you believe you're a good student, you have a study routine because that's what good students do. Short form note: Like Clear, motivational speaker Tony Robbins also argues in Awaken the Giant Within that your identity dictates your behavior. But Robbins' definition of identity is broader than Clear's. He argues that your identity also depends on factors like whether you define yourself by your past, present, or future. How to change your habits. Start with your identity. Now that you know the types of habits, which ones should you try to implement? For long-lasting behavior change, Clear recommends that you create identity-driven habits. Clear explains that this strategy is unique because most of us try to change our behavior by building goal-driven habits. However, goal-driven habits don't create long-term change because once you meet your goal, you stop performing the behavior. As Clear explains, if you adapt your actions to serve one finite purpose, your actions also become finite. For example, say you ace the test for which you've spent 2 extra hours every day studying. Since you've achieved your goal, you'll stop this behavior because there's no reason to keep studying. But since you stop studying, you never develop the long-term habits you need to improve your overall academic performance. Short-form note: letting goals drive your habits may also leave you vulnerable to the arrival fallacy, where you mistakenly think you'll be happy as long as you achieve your goals. In reality, achieving the goal may bring temporary happiness, but that happiness will quickly fade, driving you to chase a different goal that you think will bring you happiness in a never-ending cycle. Further, if you constantly change your goals, you'll constantly stop and start different habits to support them too, and therefore won't develop long-term habits that can truly enhance your life. Instead of focusing on goal-driven habits, CLEAR recommends creating identity-driven habits because these, in turn, will dictate the system and goal-driven habits you choose. CLEAR contends that the beliefs of the person you want to be dictate what systems you implement. Identity-driven habits help you decide what game to play, process-driven habits teach you how to play the game, and goal-driven habits help you win the game. So you need to start with the desired identity to find the right habits that lead to the right results. In other words, you need to create identity-driven habits. According to CLEAR, creating identity-driven habits works because by behaving like the person you want to be, you gather evidence that you are that person, and eventually you believe that you are that person. Once you believe you're that person, you'll perform the habits of that person because it's who you are. You no longer have to convince yourself to do the habit. You do the habit easily because it's an expression of your identity. For example, you might determine that someone who aces their next test must be conscientious. You decide that a conscientious person doesn't just develop a good study routine, but they also get 8 hours of sleep, so they're alert in class. So you do too. Over time, these habits lead to acing your tests, but you continue them even after you meet your goal. This is because you've gathered enough evidence to believe that you're a conscientious person. You now perform these habits because you identify as a conscientious person, not because you want to ace your tests. Why believing you can change is essential to building habits. In order to build identity-driven habits that will determine your system, and goal-driven habits in turn, you must believe that it's possible to change your identity. Otherwise, you won't see the point in embodying the behaviors of your desired identity. But what if you don't believe you can change? In Mindset, psychology researcher Carol Dweck explains that people who don't believe they can change have a fixed mindset. They believe their abilities are unchangeable. The solution is to develop a growth mindset, or a belief that you can change and improve your abilities. CLEAR contends that you can develop a growth mindset by developing identity-driven habits. By repeatedly behaving like the person you want to be, you prove to yourself that it's possible to change. But there are several other ways to develop a growth mindset too, like assessing what triggers your fixed mindset so you can reframe your thoughts appropriately. New section: How Habits Form, the 4 Stages. You now know how powerful habits can be, but how do they form? CLEAR explains that your brain understands behaviors as 4 separate stages that combine to form habits. The cue is what triggers the brain to notice an opportunity for a reward. A cue can be a smell, a sound, an event, an interaction, or anything else that triggers a desire. This desire is known as the craving. The craving is the emotional relevance attached to a certain cue. When you notice the cue, the brain anticipates an opportunity for a change in your physical or emotional state. You crave the satisfaction that change will elicit, and this craving is what prompts you to act. The response is the behavior or habit you perform to elicit the change you desire. Your brain prompts you to take a certain action it believes will create the feeling of satisfaction you want. The reward is the satisfaction you gain from the action you take. You have successfully satisfied your craving and changed your physical or emotional state. The brain builds a pathway from the cue to this state of pleasure. Every time you experience the same cue, the brain will be triggered to desire that pleasure again. You'll be prompted to perform the same action, thereby creating a habit. The process works like this. Cue: you come home stressed from a long day of work. Craving: you want to feel more relaxed. Response: you drink a beer. Reward: your stress levels reduce and you feel more relaxed. Coming home from work becomes associated with drinking a beer. How habits form. Comparing experts' models. As Clear notes, his habit formation stages expand upon productivity expert Charles Duhigg's habit model from The Power of Habit, but Clear doesn't specify how his approach differs. Clear presents a 4-stage model of habit formation, but Duhigg's model has only 3 stages. First, there's the cue, or the trigger that tells your brain which habit to use. Second, there's the routine, in which you act out the habit. And third, there's the reward, which is the result of the routine and reinforces the habit. Duhigg's model doesn't include Clear's cravings stage, although Duhigg does discuss how cravings drive behavior. Clear isn't the first person to expand upon Duhigg's ideas, nor to use his language to describe how habits are formed. In 2014's A Mind for Numbers, educator Barbara Oakley also contends that habits consist of a cue, a routine, and a reward. Her definitions of these terms match Duhigg's, but she adds a 4th piece, the belief, or the idea that your habits are grounded in your perception of reality and of your own identity. This is similar to Clear's argument that your habits support your identity. But there are other models that describe the makeup of a habit too, like the one behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg presents in Tiny Habits. Unlike Clear, Fogg focuses on the elements necessary for a habit instead of the sequential stages by which a habit forms. Fogg contends that all behavior, both habitual and non-habitual, occurs if 3 elements exist. First, a prompt reminds you to execute the behavior. This is similar to Clear's cue. Then, you must have motivation to do the behavior. This is similar to Clear's craving. You must also have the ability to do the behavior. This relates to Clear's response. Most crucially, you only do the behavior if both your motivation and ability are above the threshold required to prompt action. The key difference between habits and non-habits, Fogg argues, is that habits are self-perpetuating. The more often you do something, the better you get at doing it, so your ability to do it increases. Further, the habit reward, which Fogg discusses but doesn't present as an element of his habit model, provides motivation to keep doing it. This combination of increasing ability and increasing motivation makes a behavior more likely to exceed the threshold the next time you receive the prompt, thus making you more likely to engage in the habit again. New section: 4 keys to creating habits. Now that you know how habits form, you can alter each stage to your advantage to create new, beneficial habits. Clear presents 4 keys for doing so, 1 for each stage. Key 1. Cues. Identify and use them to your advantage. Clear explains that since habits are automatic behaviors, you likely don't notice every cue triggering you to act. Therefore, the first step in creating cues that lead to good behaviors is to become aware of them. To develop awareness of your behavior, Clear recommends listing all your current daily habits. Because behaviors influence each other, the end of one habit often serves as a cue for another. When you list your habits, you'll notice which actions precede them and which follow. By listing your cues and rewards in this way, you'll discover which current behaviors could cue new desired behaviors. For example, say you want to drink more water. You could drink a glass of water immediately after you turn off your alarm each morning. Short form note: Many authors have argued that to change an unwanted behavior, you must first consciously identify it. When following Clear's advice to do so, consider creating a time log. Spend a week tracking what you do every half hour. Knowing exactly how you spend time might help you notice habits you weren't aware of, like if you play an online game after every meal. Use awareness to your advantage. Clear recommends exploiting your newfound awareness of your habits in 2 ways to form better habits. The first technique Clear recommends is to plan in advance when and where you'll perform a new behavior. Use the formula, when X occurs, I will do Y. This strategy makes the cue noticeable by attributing a specific time and place to the behavior. Plus, research suggests that you're more likely to do activities you pre-schedule. For example, if your list of habits has a gap between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., consider scheduling a new behavior during that time. For example, you might choose to study for an hour every day at 6 p.m. Short-form note. Psychologists agree that planning a habit in advance works partly because it makes you more aware of the cue, but there are other reasons too. Notably, failing to honor a clear if-then goal makes you uncomfortable. Telling others amplifies this discomfort because then failing your goal also causes embarrassment. So consider sharing your intention too. The second technique Clear recommends is habit chaining, which he calls habit stacking. With this technique, instead of linking a desired behavior to an event, like a time of day, you link the behavior to an existing habit you do every day. Use the formula, after I do X, I will do Y. For example, after I put my dinner dishes in the sink, I will study for 1 hour. This strategy makes the cue noticeable by connecting a desired habit to a fully formed habit. Short-form note. Clear argues that single habits compound into massive changes that improve your life. Similarly, in the 5 a.m. Club, leadership expert Robin Sharma contends that developing the right morning routine, the right habit chain, will compound into massive changes that improve your life. Sharma recommends waking at 5 a.m., then exercising for 20 minutes, reflecting for 20 minutes, and learning for 20 minutes. This morning ritual sets a foundation of focus and productivity that you continue throughout each day. And by repeating it daily, you lead a more focused and productive life. Clear adds that to make a cue obvious, you must be as specific as possible in the behavior that will follow. Knowing exactly where, when, and how you'll do an action makes doing it easier. You must also ensure the cue is realistic. If the logistics surrounding a new behavior don't support its implementation, it won't get done. For example, saying, I'll study at my desk, specific location, after putting dishes in the sink, specific cue, for 1 hour, specific intention, is better than saying, I'll study after dinner. But if the hour after dinner is the only time you socialize with your roommate, it's unrealistic to plan a study session then. Short-form note. Research suggests that being specific about your behavior helps partly because pre-planning good behavior makes you less likely to put off doing it. However, being too specific can backfire if you have unrealistic expectations, like if you only want to study when your kids are asleep. Consider lowering your expectations and settling for good enough. For example, if you have kids, study when the kids are quieter, not just when they're asleep. Key 2. Craving. Increase the appeal of a new habit. You can also make creating habits easier with techniques that affect the second stage of habit formation, the craving. Clear contends that cravings lead to action because you want a reward, not because you enjoy the reward itself. Say you eat chocolate for the first time. Your brain will release a neurotransmitter called dopamine after you experience the pleasure of eating chocolate. Now, whenever you see chocolate, your brain will release dopamine because you anticipate the pleasure of eating it. It's this anticipatory surge of dopamine that drives you to act, not the dopamine you feel after you feel pleasure. Short-form note. In The Willpower Instinct, health psychologist Kelly McGonigal demonstrates how much power anticipation can have by describing how desire and dopamine drive action even if you don't enjoy the reward. If you're hooked on chocolate, you'll continue to eat a chocolate bar even if it's stale. This is due to dopamine. Your brain expects chocolate to be delicious, so your dopamine transmitters try to convince you that the next bite will be more delicious. It's wanting, not experiencing, the reward that drives the behavior. If anticipation drives action, Clear hypothesizes you should maximize the appeal of a desired behavior so that you anticipate it more. Clear outlines several ways you can do this, two of which are: 1. Associating the new habit with other, positive behaviors, and 2. Reframing the struggle of a new habit in a positive light. 1. Connect habits you should do to things you want to do. Clear's first strategy for increasing the appeal of a new habit is to sandwich a desired behavior between something you already do and something you want to do. Use the formula, after X, current habit, I will do Y, new habit. After I do Y, I get to do Z, craved habit. For example, say you struggle to study after dinner because you'd rather play video games. Try saying to yourself, after I eat dinner, I will study for an hour. After I study for an hour, I get to play video games for an hour. Soon, you'll crave the study session because you'll start to associate it with the more pleasurable activities. Short form note: only doing something you want to do after something you should do requires a lot of willpower. You might think to yourself, why not just play video games without studying? In The Willpower Instinct, McGonigal explains that you can combat temptations like this by adjusting your physiology with techniques like slowing your breathing. This turns on your pause and plan response, which protects you from making decisions that are bad for you. 2. Redefine behaviors as opportunities instead of obligations. Clear's second strategy for increasing the appeal of a new habit is to redefine your behaviors. Reframe obligations as opportunities. This small change in perspective leads you to focus on the positive elements of the behavior. If you have the opportunity to study, you start to appreciate how lucky you are to be able to work towards your dream job. Focusing on the reward, the dream job, helps you view your struggles as steps to your goal, which increases your motivation to do the behavior, study. Short form note: focusing on the reward of a behavior you view as an obligation to make yourself do it is a form of extrinsic motivation. You're doing the behavior because you want the extrinsic, external reward. In Drive, author Daniel Pink argues that extrinsic motivation works for routine tasks, but can actually decrease creativity. So if you're trying to implement a creative habit, like painting every day, you may want to skip this strategy. Key 3. Response. Decrease the difficulty. Another way to improve your habits is to focus on the third stage of habit formation, the response, or the behavior itself. Clear argues that it's human nature to only follow through on behaviors that are easy to perform. So, to stay motivated, he recommends making behavior as effortless as possible. Clear clarifies that making behaviors easy doesn't mean only doing easy things. The idea is to make it easy for you to keep showing up for the behavior you want to perform. By showing up, you maintain your desired identity, which gives you pride and confidence to keep making progress. Short form note: contrary to Clear, some research suggests that paradoxically, it's easier to make a dramatic change than a small one. Dr. Dean Ornish designed a program that successfully helped 77% of people with heart disease change their lifestyles. This is impressive because without the program, 90% of heart patients who undergo severe surgery don't improve their lifestyles, even if doing so would save their lives. Dr. Ornish attributes his results partly to the dramatic changes his program requires. By making dramatic changes, heart patients saw fast, dramatic results that motivated them to continue. Make behaviors easier. CLEAR recommends reducing the effort an action requires by removing any obstacles between you and the behavior. The more obstacles there are, the less likely you are to act. For example, if you want to read more before bed, remove the obstacle of needing to get a book by placing a book on your pillow after waking up each morning. Short form note: removing an obstacle only makes performing an action easier if you remove the right obstacle. To identify what that is, examine how compatible the behavior is with existing routines, as well as the time, money, physical effort, and mental effort involved. For example, placing a book on your pillow won't help you read before bed if you're too tired to concentrate on the book. In that case, the obstacle you really need to address is your energy level. CLEAR suggests another way to make a behavior easier. Break it down into steps that only take 2 minutes or less. Then do just the first 2-minute step. This doesn't mean you do a 2-minute version of the habit. If you want to cook dinner every night, the first step is opening the refrigerator, not microwaving a frozen meal. Most of us try to make dramatic changes when building new habits, but dramatic changes are difficult to maintain over time. When you focus on tiny increments instead, each small success motivates you to achieve other successes. So committing to 2-minute actions at a time makes it easier to perform each required step until you've achieved the full habit. For example, say you decide to start cooking dinner every day. You're successful for a few days, but on the 4th day you're too tired, so you order takeout. Suddenly, the behavior has stopped. Instead, break down cook dinner every day into easy steps that only take 2 minutes to do, like open the refrigerator at dinner time. You can do that even when you're tired. Once you've mastered that habit, the next 2-minute step is to pull out one vegetable you could eat raw. The next step is to pull out a knife and cutting board. Each of these 2-minute actions connect to get you to the point of being ready to make some food. The obstacles to overcome are small compared with the overwhelming idea of cooking all the time. Short form note: in Tiny Habits, Fogg also recommends shrinking desired behaviors down to make them easier because small successes keep you motivated. But Fogg presents 2 strategies for doing so. His first strategy mimics CLEAR's. Do the first step of the desired behavior to maximize your chances of repeating it. But Fogg's second strategy is something CLEAR doesn't explicitly discuss. Do a scaled-back version of your desired behavior. For example, if you want to cook dinner every night, both Fogg and CLEAR would recommend the first step of opening the refrigerator every night, but only Fogg would recommend the scaled-back version of microwaving a frozen meal. Key 4. Reward. Make it fulfilling. Finally, CLEAR recommends habit formation techniques that focus on the final stage of habit formation, the reward. CLEAR contends that rewards must be fulfilling for habits to form, because if you don't enjoy the results of your efforts, you won't keep trying. Many rewards you receive are delayed. For example, you only receive a degree after years of studying. But we're wired to want instant gratification, and most good behaviors need time before the positive results accumulate. You sacrifice now to benefit later. So to stay motivated to continue good habits, CLEAR recommends finding ways to create rewards that are instantly fulfilling. Short form note: in Switch, authors Chip and Dan Heath recommend one technique for providing instantly fulfilling rewards when working on a long-term goal. Build small, frequent milestones into your plan and celebrate them. This ensures a regular supply of instant gratification opportunities. Consider adopting this technique when building habits. For example, if you want to run regularly, celebrate when you've run a total of 5, 10, then 20 miles. And new habits with rewards. One way to create fulfilling rewards is to add positive reinforcement at the end of the desired behavior. Clear explains that we remember the end of a behavior more than any other part. So doing something immediately satisfying at the end of the behavior will keep you motivated in a way that delayed rewards can't. For example, the reward of a better grade next month may not elicit enough pleasure to keep you motivated to study an extra hour every day. But if you end each study session by eating a cookie, you'll increase your motivation to study. Short form note: having trouble thinking of appropriate reinforcement? In Tiny Habits, Fogg suggests that whenever you successfully perform a habit, you celebrate in a way that makes you feel accomplished and happy. Think doing a little jig or congratulating yourself. Record your habits. Another way you can create fulfilling rewards is by consciously keeping track of your habits. Clear recommends creating a visual representation of your progress, like by marking a day on a calendar. When you can visually see your accomplishments, you'll be motivated to continue acting. The act of tracking can feel rewarding in itself. It's satisfying to mark each successful completion of an action in some way. The pleasure experienced through that act becomes a cue to want to feel that satisfaction again. Short form note: if you're a perfectionist, consider tracking your habit less often than you'd like at first. For example, do a habit you want to perform every day, but only track it twice a week. You'll see enough progress to motivate you, but reduce the likelihood that you'll miss a day on your tracker, and the chances you'll grow so discouraged by imperfection that you give up. Only track one major habit at a time to avoid becoming overwhelmed by the act. Short form note: in a separate forum, Clear adds that you should only develop one habit at a time. Many habits are actually combinations of behaviors, so taking on too many could overwhelm you. Breaking bad habits. You likely have habits you wish you didn't. Since a behavior must go through all 4 stages of habit formation to become a habit, disrupting one of those stages can break a bad habit. To do so, invert the keys from positive to negative in the following way. 1. Cue. Make it unnoticeable. 2. Craving. Decrease the appeal. 3. Response. Increase the effort. 4. Reward. Make it unfulfilling. For example, if you want to break your habit of shopping at the mall on your way home from work, you could make the queue less noticeable by taking a different route home. You could decrease the appeal of the habit by attaching a paper to your rearview mirror that shows how much money you could save if you stopped shopping daily. You could increase the effort of shopping by parking on the bottom floor of the garage and making yourself climb the stairs to reach your desired store. Finally, since paying by cash rather than card makes you more aware of your spending, you could pay exclusively in cash. That way, shopping won't give you the reward of stress relief, but rather add to your stress by making you worry about your finances. Short form note: in The Power of Habit, Duhigg presents an alternative model for breaking bad habits. Uncover the main cue and reward, then change the response in between. For example, if you learn that on your way home from work, cue, you go to the mall, response, for stress release, reward, find another response that reduces stress, like calling a friend during your commute instead. New section: Finding the right habits. You now know how to create habits, but which habits should you develop? Clear explains that the habits you gravitate toward and are able to maintain are influenced by your genetic makeup, predispositions, and natural talents. So he recommends choosing behaviors that highlight your strengths and interests. They'll be more enjoyable and easier to stick with. The Big 5 Personality Traits. One way to figure out your optimal behaviors is to learn what personality traits you possess. There are 5 main personality traits, each with a spectrum of behavior that highlights who you are. All 5 are rooted in biology and typically remain unchanged throughout your life. Openness to experience. People high on this spectrum are more daring. People low on the spectrum are more careful. Conscientiousness. People high on this spectrum are more methodical. People low on this spectrum are more relaxed. Extroversion. People high on this spectrum are more sociable. People low on this spectrum are more reclusive. Agreeableness. People high on this spectrum are affable. People low on this spectrum are more withdrawn. Neuroticism. People high on this spectrum are more fretful. People low on this spectrum are more assured. Why the Big Five may not be useful. Assessing your personality using the Big Five traits may not be as useful as CLEAR contends. Psychologists use questionnaires to assess the Big Five traits, but the year after Atomic Habits was published, researchers found that these questionnaires may not accurately assess the personality traits of people from non-Westernized countries. For example, researchers found that people from non-Westernized countries tended to give different answers to different interviewers instead of answering the same way each time. Moreover, these traits can fluctuate throughout your life. For example, people tend to become less open and extroverted as they become teenagers, then more conscientious and agreeable as they grow from younger to middle-aged adults. These traits also fluctuate because they're not just rooted in biology. Environmental factors affect them too. For example, trauma tends to trigger changes on the neuroticism spectrum. So while the Big Five may be a useful framework for understanding your personality, it has limitations, which means you shouldn't choose which habits to create based on that framework alone. CLEAR explains that your personality doesn't dictate which behaviors you're capable of performing. However, your personality does suggest which behaviors you'll most likely be successful with. For example, an extrovert may have a harder time staying off of social media than an introvert. CLEAR states that there is a version of every habit that works with your personality. He recommends choosing the version that fits your natural personality, not the version that worked for others. Doing so increases the chance you'll succeed. For example, your friend may have lost weight by working out at a gym, but if you hate crowds, skip the gym and take daily walks instead. Short form note. In The Four Tendencies, Gretchen Rubin also contends that you should consider your personality when choosing what habits to develop. But her argument hinges on how your personality drives you to respond to expectations. For example, if you respond well to your own expectations, you'll go to the gym simply because you've committed to doing so. But if you respond to others' expectations better than your own, build external expectations into your habit to make sure you do it, like by hiring a personal trainer who's expecting you. New section: Continuing to show up. Once you successfully develop a habit, how do you ensure that it continues working for you long term? In this section, we'll discuss the 3 major potential downsides of creating habits, and the strategies CLEAR recommends for combating these downsides. How to prevent boredom. Make behaviors harder. CLEAR contends that one potential downside with creating a habit is that you may grow bored. This is because boredom is inevitable with any repeated activity. At some point, your motivation for your new habit may wane. When this happens, it's easy to abandon new behaviors that are still working to find more exciting behaviors. Short form note: if you can push through the boredom of doing a habit you've grown accustomed to, you might experience some unexpected benefits. Letting your mind wander during boring tasks has several benefits, like boosting creativity. CLEAR contends that making behaviors harder can help curb boredom. This is because your brain remains engaged and motivated to improve when it feels challenged. But the level of challenge is crucial. You should make the behavior just hard enough to be interesting, but easy enough that you can still do it. If the challenge is too easy, you'll lose interest. If it's too hard, you'll grow frustrated and give up. Short form note: what if you're bored by a behavior you can't reasonably make harder? Keep things exciting by introducing a fun new element. For example, make your healthy breakfast habit more fun by cooking your eggs in a humorously shaped pan. How difficult should it be? Clear suggests ensuring you succeed half the time. This way, you'll experience enough success to warrant continued action and enough failure to make you work harder. Rewards experienced in this intermittent way make every attempt novel, which reduces boredom. Short-form note. If you've ever struggled to not look at your phone, you've already experienced how intermittent rewards can create powerful habits. In Digital Minimalism, productivity expert Cal Newport describes how many technological products, like our phones, are designed to provide intermittent rewards so that we continue using them. How to keep progressing. Build on momentum. Clear contends that a second potential downside with creating habits is that you may stop progressing. This becomes an issue when you're using habits to automate certain behaviors you need to reach a long-term goal, like if you're mastering scales because you eventually want to master the piano. Habits can prevent you from progressing, Clear explains, because once you automate a behavior, you stop paying close attention to it and start to miss small mistakes. You still think you're making progress because you're putting in the reps, but you're only reinforcing your bad habit. For example, once you've learned your scales, you might play them at the beginning of every piano practice and assume you're making progress. But since you're no longer focused on your scales, you don't realize that you're playing them at an inconsistent volume. So each time you run scales, you reinforce the habit of playing them at an inconsistent volume. Unless your actions change, you won't grow how you want. Short-form note. The popularity of New York Times bestseller Outliers may partially explain why people believe that repeating a behavior is enough to progress in it. In his book, Malcolm Gladwell popularized the 10,000-hour rule, which stated that anybody who practices a skill for 10,000 hours can become an expert in it. But in Peak, author and psychologist Anders Ericsson, who wrote the study Gladwell based his rule on, refuted this rule, noting that how you practice is much more important than how much you practice. You can ensure you keep progressing by building momentum into your system. Once a behavior becomes automated, Clear recommends building on it with 1% improvements. This keeps your behavior novel and your progress continuous, and thus prevents you from getting stuck. For example, if you're trying to master the piano, don't just run scales once you're comfortable playing them. Improve this ability by adjusting your volume as you play the scale. Short-form note. In The Compound Effect, Darren Hardy also recommends shaking up your routine if your habits aren't leading to progress. But he contends that changing your routine is enough to liven things up and help you recapture your passions. You don't necessarily have to improve it. How to continue evolving. Craft an adaptable identity. Clear contends that a third potential downside with creating habits is that you can grow too attached to the identity they represent. This can make evolving past that identity difficult because if you lose that identity for any reason, you'll lose both yourself and motivation. For example, if you have a habit of studying every day and thus identify as a good student, who are you when you graduate? Short-form note. In The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, author Mark Manson elaborates on how growing attached to a particular identity prevents you from evolving. He contends that people avoid changes that could improve their lives because these changes challenge their identity and push them out of their comfort zone. To avoid losing yourself, Clear recommends, think of yourself in terms of characteristics instead of labels. When you identify with multiple characteristics instead of one label, your identity remains adaptable. For example, I'm a good student becomes I'm someone who invests in learning. You can still be that after graduation. In this way, an adaptable identity allows you to continue beneficial habits even as the circumstances of your life inevitably change. For example, someone who invests in learning still reads regularly about their field, but a good student stops reading after graduation. An adaptable identity goes with the flow of life. A label-based identity fights against it. Short-form note: just be careful what characteristics you use to define yourself. In Awaken the Giant Within, Robbins warns that tying your identity to anything likely to change will likely trigger an identity crisis in the future. So, I'm friendly is a better characteristic to define yourself by than I'm popular, since popularity often fluctuates. New section: Looking forward. Continue to reflect and adjust. Clear contends that habit formation does not end once you build the habit. Your brain is constantly scanning your environment for cues and ways to automate behavior. Therefore, you need to continually check in with your identity and behaviors to ensure they're still working for you. So, Clear recommends reflect on your habits and progress, and look for areas that promote growth and areas that require refinement. The more small adjustments in behavior you make, the more likely you will end up on the path of your choosing. You can become anyone you want and reach any goal you desire if you work hard and remain aware of the life you're leading. Short-form note: you can only effectively reflect on your habits and progress if you're able to admit when you're failing and take that failure into stride. In Make Your Bed, retired Navy SEAL Admiral William H. McRaven shows how to do so. Instead of giving up when you fail, use failure to push yourself harder and grow stronger. For example, during SEAL training, McRaven continually performed poorly on a swimming test and had to endure extra training as a result. But this training made him stronger, and McRaven eventually became the fastest swimmer in his cohort.